good with the shot on the goal!
Big goal for Ferris State, making it a 3-1 game.
Great job by the Bulldogs to find a way to get it done.
Some people don't like it, but that's just how I am.
College sports is shifting. It's all about game experience.
I can't think of better people to be spending my time with.
We raise a family here, and it's something that's not seen in a lot of other schools.
You're listening to Behind the Bulldogs, brought to you by Ferris State Athletics.
Behind the Bulldogs, Summer Series Episode 2, Golf. We're going to have a good episode for you. It's myself, Joe, Brody, Brandon, also in the studio. We got a lot to talk about, but the first thing we got to say is shout out, which team won the Harrison Watt Memorial?
Sam Stark's team.
Wow. Figures for that one. Special shout out to Coach Stark, and I forget who's on his team, but the annual Ferris Athletics staff outing was the other day, and they took home the chip. So
I think they came in at -6, I believe was their score, so shot pretty well.
Yeah, how did you shoot, Brody, though, more importantly?
Individually, I didn't play terrible, but definitely not my best performance, so bad looks for the team. But
that happens, dog.
It was fun. Just great to be on the golf course and hang out with everyone, so it was a great time.
Yeah, that's good to hear. But welcome back, everybody. It's been a week off. We've had some technical difficulties. Our mixer, appropriately named Bessie, just would not cooperate with us. She's back, though, and firing with all gear. So
we're
going to perform in the sky for a second.
Nothing could keep us down.
No, nothing. We will continue at all costs possible to keep the show running. But as Joe mentioned, we're going to talk men's and women's golf today. The results, including the men's national appearance, which was pretty sweet. We'll get into that as well as some breakout candidates, and we'll go into the season review and even preview for next year as a whole. So buckle up for that. But first, we got to thank our great friends at Dezos Digital, our primary sponsor of Behind the Bulldogs, all summer, all fall, all spring long, pretty much. Anytime we're recording the show, they are with us 24/7. They do a lot of great work. Any digital media, advertising, website design, they are here for you. You can find out more, DezosDigital.com. You can see their work, you can see their services, and go hit them up, and they can certainly do all the great things for you. We're glad to have them with us. But fellas, we waste no time. Let's get right into it. We'll start on the men's side, obviously, with the prominence of the Nationals appearance. I mean, how about that team performance in of itself, shooting pretty much at par on what Joe has actually played before, the course.
I did play that course.
And it's hard.
I'm not, well... But I'm also a terrible golfer. Let's toss that in there.
You're not a terrible golfer.
You are not terrible.
Not that great, but I played that course. Crooked Cat is a very tough one. I think it's a LPGA course. I mean, I know there's been some events that I've played there, but I mean, right there in Orlando, it's not an easy one, and especially for them to play that well, it's very impressive from me. So, I mean, I played the course, so that's at least some type of credibility.
Yeah, you can testify to how great of a performance.
My 18 birdies handicap, I think, is a 20. So.
Hey,
respect.
Keep that in mind.
Mine's 25.
What's the hardest part of this particular course for you? Was it like distance or controlling the ball?
I'm trying to remember because it's been like 2 years since I played it. But the fairways when I played it were pretty tight, and especially the greens being down there, they get a little bit faster, which is not an easy thing. But I mean, especially if you're playing golf every day. But for the everyday golfer, speed control and especially making sure that you can get good shots after the tee shot is going to be the hardest thing about this course.
The reason that I asked that for the show that we're doing right now is it was mostly just because of the way that the Dogs were able to play that course. You know, after a little bit of a slow start, they really picked up the aggressiveness, tried to play from a little bit more behind, and then it came right down to the wire basically. So that's impressive that on a tough course that's tight and fast that you're able to maintain that style of play, not just for an individual player, but for an entire team. And so much of what the Bulldogs have had success with has just been that consistency and that mentality.
For sure.
Absolutely. Looking at the team results there from Winter Garden, Florida, how about Nathan Kranick? What a performance. Absolute dog.
Round of applause.
Unbelievable. 7 under par, second overall in the entire country. What an incredible performance for him. Caleb Bond tied for 37th as well as a podcast friend of ours, Zach Corner, who was on the show. You can find that episode in the feed below. And then McCoy as well as Sam finishing 77th and 83rd respectively, and definitely in the single digits above par at 10 over par, which is really impressive considering how great this team battled. And I liked what you mentioned, Brody. This team really does a great job of being resilient, finding a lot of those fixes going into rounds 2 and 3. And I think especially once we start going into more of the preview, how this team can get better, it's simply just round 1, getting out to a quicker start, getting strokes taken off right away. Obviously, the improvement is huge, but being able to have that first step being so much higher and then being able to build upon that, that's really the only thing for this team that's been missing all year. And that's really what's keeping them from being a top 3, top 5 national team of the year. And right now, they're just showing that they have that potential. And they're, especially with the depth that this group has, the experience, even though it's a lot of freshmen, a lot of sophomores that are built up into the program. I mean, Coach Sam Stark's got a good thing going right now for this Bulldog program.
Absolutely. I was kind of figuring out what the order was going to be today. So I'll go next, of course. But yeah, that's the biggest thing that I want to talk about too, is just that kind of improving on the start a little bit, because especially for the national tournament, kind of going at an 8th, you have a little bit of a downturn. Day 2, you get down all the way to the 10th spot, but then you're able to battle back and finish 9th sole spot there. So, I mean, it's going to be a tough spot, especially seeing that you have so many good teams in front of them. But for them to just have that individual performance from Nathan, as well as being able to battle back after a day 2, because when you kind of fall, even it's only 2 spots, but when you fall even that far and you have to, a lot of pressure on that final day, it's going to be tough to be able to just be able to play well and just say, okay, we have a lot of ground to make up. Don't know if, a podium spot's going to be in the conversation, but still got to go out and play well. And for them to jump up another spot and get the sole possession of 9th, I think that just speaks a lot about this team's resiliency.
I think, too, it's pretty impressive to say that, okay, so first of all, 9th place finish overall after a little bit of a slow start and then the stumble on day 2, but just 4 strokes behind qualifying for the next round. So they were right there. They were in contention. The final day, I remember we were kind of following along online and being like, holy cow, they could actually do this. We were through 9 or so, and I think we had jumped up into that 8th or even 7th spot at one point before we did unfortunately fall back down a little bit on the back 9. But just the resiliency, as Joe was saying, is so impressive from this team. The way that they're able to bounce back, they show that aggressiveness in the later part of these tournaments. That's something that's been a consistent theme for not only the men, but also the women. And I really like the way that they are able to go about that. But absolutely, fellas, the start. If they could start as hot as they finish, holy cow, this team would be probably a national champion right now.
For sure.
Yeah, it's very impressive. And one thing that was also very impressive when I looked back at some of the stats from this nationals tournament, the Bulldogs were 4th overall in scoring on par 3s. They take care of the holes that they can reach in one swing. And I think that's something that's really important to note. I believe they were right around the 7th spot in par 4s and just outside the top 10 in par 5s, but par 3s really was where this team took a big step. But kind of looking more at the schedule, kind of in a review, obviously had to qualify in Oklahoma as a top 5 team, which they did. And then how about, of course, the GLIAC championship? I mean, isn't that great, especially for this team continuously, whether it's the women's or the men's? A Bulldog team is winning, and they've won each of the last 3 years, and that's super impressive, just the consistency. And I think especially when you look at it, this team's battle tested going into the postseason. They're playing a lot of these tough tournaments. They're going to UIndy. They're going to Findlay. They're playing a lot of these good Midwest teams that they're going to see, not necessarily just at regionals, but at nationals. And I think that's a really key important part. And me and Joe obviously talked to Coach Stark early on his scheduling. I mean, it's put into place for a reason. They're playing a lot of these tough teams, and it's so that they're built for the big moment on the big stage, and they certainly proved it.
And I think that's the best part about, especially the Midwest region, getting so much better at golf, because, I mean, you have GVSU too getting tossed in here with the GLIAC. That's a team that usually makes it to the postseason. You saw them make it. I think they made this third day cut for the team championship as well, but it's still, you are able to kind of get people around or get schools around that can give you some really, really solid battle-tested abilities for it to be able to kind of have it later on this season, like you said, with Findlay and stuff like that. And the best part about that, too, is you don't have very far to travel, so that's not going to be too much where you're going to have to kind of, be sitting in a bus and kind of make sure that you're staying loose and stuff like that. So it just, I think, adds a lot to being able to, make sure that this team gets to those later parts of the years, make sure that they're really well, kind of well-tuned, and make sure that they can hit those shots and being able to kind of go into those tournaments where you're going to be seeing teams like those down south teams in Florida, Tampa, Barry, and stuff like that get to play all year round, and to make sure that, hey, we weren't able to get out on the course, in those winter months, but still being able to just get that quick kind of welcome back to reality moment in the spring season is big time.
The preparation with their schedule, certainly is at a peak in the spring season, but it even goes back to the fall season. They're playing in the Malone Fall Classic, the Bulldog Fall Classic, the UIndy Fall Invite, Brandon, as you were talking about, the Midwest Regional, the Doc Sprague, Kentucky Wesleyan Invite. I mean, those are prestigious Midwest tournaments where they're taking top 2 or 3 in almost every event outside of the Doc Sprague, where they finished 5th. That was their lowest placement in the fall schedule on the men's side, which is just so impressive, first of all, that they're able to play that difficult of a schedule and succeed the way they do, but it really starts with preparation early in September for the end of the year.
Absolutely. Very impressive. And especially for Coach Stark, equally as impressive as winning the Harrison Watt Memorial MVP, probably trophy if there was one given out. Also GLIAC Coach of the Year. Definitely probably around the same level those two awards are, but certainly both
prestigious.
Yes,
absolutely.
Very, very prestigious. But Nathan Kranick as well, McCoy, Biagioli, and Caleb Bond, all GLIAC finishers individually on the men's side. Just goes to show, especially when you look at guys like Caleb, McCoy, these guys are competing at a high level right out of the gate. That really shows not only the quality class of recruits that are coming in, but training right away, adjusting to college golf at a fast pace. And that's something certainly to know. On the women's side, as we'll kind of flip over to that side and their season as of a whole, Lizzie Anderson, Danny Statowski, and Cameron Shannon, all first team, or I should say all GLIAC honorees overall. I believe Cameron was the lone first teamer. Danny was second choice, and then Lizzie was honorable mention. On the men's side, should have mentioned this as well, McCoy was the freshman of the year, which is very impressive as well.
Insane.
As Caleb first team and Nathan and McCoy both second team. But back to the women's, obviously good finish for them overall. Just knocking on the doorstep to get into nationals. We wanted to see both teams there so badly, but still great performance. And it's really kind of the same MO really as the men's team. They do a really good job of being able to improve strokes, and the consistency is usually there. Just the first round sometimes really holds them back, and that's really the difference. And it's kind of ironic that we're talking about two different teams with two different sets of personnel, but they're playing the same type of golf. And I guess for Coach Stark and really the improvement of the program, I guess it's kind of nice to have that one common problem that you can all work together on both sides.
Yeah, that's a positive too, because I mean, it's going to be tough, especially because you think of it as just like, is that kind of a problem, seeing that it's a program wide type thing? But I think that is more of a positive to think about, because you already see, hey, we do really well in those second, third days. If we can get there, it's just that first day that we got to fix it up. So it's definitely a positive, I think, when you look at problems to have with a team, but still, it's going to be some solid improvement for this next year. I can guarantee that, because Coach Stark has been able to talk to us about, his coaching philosophy and stuff like that. And knowing him and what he does for these teams, I think you're going to see a lot of improvement, and day one improvement especially.
Brandon, you mentioned that the Dogs were close to also qualifying for the national championships. They were only 7 strokes away from reaching that mark, which is extremely impressive. And also, as you guys were talking about, they shot a 318 on day one, 316 on the second day, and a 315 final round total. So they improved every single day. They put themselves in a position come that Tuesday where they tried to wrap up, or I'm sorry, on the Wednesday where they were wrapping the event up, where they could have, with a really good round, put themselves in a running for a national championship spot. So just an outstanding season for the women as well. Unfortunately, did come up just a little bit short, but so much to like and so much promise.
It really is. And really going into that East Regional overall, Danny finishing 18 over par, tied for 23rd overall. Cameron tied for 33rd there in the second spot for the Bulldogs. Lizzie tied for 35. Hallie and Taylor both tied for 53rd overall individually to get you to that 7th team finish, tied with Gannon, as you mentioned, Brody, only 7 strokes away from making it to the national championship. But really kind of the same as the men's, not necessarily trying to make it like it's just all one jumbled recap, but it's really the same thing. They are very much competitively ready to go into these environments. You look a lot of the times at their schedule, and you looking at a lot of these tournaments, they're going to Grove City, Ohio. They're playing a lot of these teams. They're going to Indy. A lot of these teams that you're seeing at the national tournament and teams that they are chasing. And that's something that is especially to note moving forward for this program, but also looking kind of at the team stats as well. like the men's, par threes. This team was 5th in the regional statistically on attacking par threes. And we talked to Cameron Shannon, me and Joe did a few weeks back, and she said that that was one of the things about the team and her, especially individually, that they loved about being able to take and attack a lot of the tees in a lot of these courses, whether it's par threes, par fours, par fives. They want to play aggressive, and that's very obvious. And that's a good trait to have for a young team, and that's something really to look forward to next year.
Yeah, I think you're able to kind of see the positives from this year. And especially, I mean, we're not really losing a whole lot of players when it comes to the women's team. So I think that just adds even more promise to the season. But yeah, being able to just kind of keep on what they're good at with the par threes, but then just kind of improving a little bit on the par fives. Because I think, well, I mean, they were still, 5th or 6th in the regional when it came to par 5 performances. So you still get to see a lot of well-rounded performances all throughout, but just making sure that they can improve where they can, but still stay very consistent with what they're good at.
For sure.
I think good finishes on the par threes and the par fives really show you that they executed the game plan to perfection. Because if you can attack pin placements on a par three and you can get after it off the tee on a par five to put yourself in a position to reach in 2 or for sure 3 and give yourself a reasonable birdie opportunity, that's the measure of success for an aggressive team. And because the team was able to improve their score every single day, I really think that just shows you that they're listening, they're being receptive to how Coach Stark is trying to get them to play, and they're executing it, which is sometimes the hardest part of that process.
It really is. And I think we can all agree, fellas, that golf is hard, and it certainly is impressive to see the consistency year after year after year that they are playing with. It's not like just us going out there and one time we're going to shoot an 85 and the next it's a 105. Like, they are consistently shooting great scores, and that really goes down to foundations, really goes down to technique, and it goes down to coaching and being able to be receptive with that criticism and also be resilient out on the course. And this team shows all of those qualities, and those are what good teams are made of. So it's certainly something to look forward to, especially looking into next year, into the postseason. Not that we're getting too far in a hurry, because there's still a fall season to go ahead, but it's certainly going to be really interesting to see where this team goes, because I mean, men's and women's side, I mean, we're looking at the rosters, obviously eligibility. You can only judge who's coming back based on what grade they're in. Obviously, a lot of these players are still from the COVID years, where there's now going to be a decision that's made, whether it's take a 5th year, use all of your athletic eligibility, or if you're academically ready to go into the workforce, that's totally fine. And we encourage people to do that if that's their decision too. So there's obviously only so much we can predict as far as breakout candidates and as far as who's going to be back for this team next year. Because of course, transfer portal, we don't want to talk about it too much, but that is obviously a possibility when it goes. So there's a lot of options, but just based on what years that these players have been in, the experience that they have, I mean, it's only going upward. You can insert the Stonks meme if you want. It's just trending straight up the charts right now for both teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I've kind of talking about it now, especially with Nathan Cranach. I mean, we were kind of expecting him maybe to come back, maybe have a chance to, take that sole possession of a national championship trophy on the individual side. But for him, especially because we just saw an Instagram post where I think his time at Ferris over. So especially for him to put in the work that he did and be able to get those accolades is awesome for him. But yeah, it's just the thing too, where you get a solid mix of seniors, juniors, freshmen, and sophomores that can just kind of make sure that these programs are just going to keep continuing to get better as time goes on. You don't really when you look through the roster list, you don't really see it too heavy in one class or anything where you might have an up year and then the next year is going to be a little bit farther down. I think we're going to see a nice healthy mix of ages on these teams that's just going to make it so that way these teams are just good for these next few years.
I think a big part of the success, too, is that balance you were talking about, Joe. You have players that have been around the block for 2 or 3 years, those juniors and seniors on your lineup that are not only leaders on the team, but are also really good players, and they play the game the way that it's supposed to be played, and that's a big part of leadership as well. But then also a good balance of the younger players that come in and not only make an impact by the time that they're sophomores, but make an impact the moment that they step on the golf course. And on the men's side, McCoy this year was a big reason for that. And then Caleb last year when he came in was playing really, really good golf, didn't have the sophomore slump, was maybe even better this year than he was last year. And that's exactly what you need. On the women's side, you had Hallie come in and really do a great job this season. So that youth is so important, and it's really going to carry both these programs forward.
Absolutely. And we'll just go right into the breakout candidates here. We'll start on the men's side, obviously, with the roster outlook. One sole senior, Adam Masri, he will probably be leaving us unless he can sneak his way into another year of eligibility, but he is a senior in the roster books, so he might be out of eligibility. And there's 4 juniors, Trent Barth, Shane Buffet, Zach Corner, and Nathan Kranick that might be back. They might be moving on. We can't really make that guess at this time. But then you have a really big key part of this rotation of this top 5, as we mentioned, Caleb Bond, Blake Connolly, who's also a junior. Then you have obviously Sam Havey. Those guys are sophomores, right? And there's freshmen coming in. So it's a really big core right now for this group moving forward. A lot of experience, like you guys mentioned, the mix of the two, which is super, super important for playing the game of golf, because you got to be able to adjust to different courses differently, and different mindsets definitely take care of that. But going into the breakout candidates here, I'll go ahead and go first. I got my pick locked in, so I'm going to steal it before anybody else has the opportunity to do so. I'm going to go with Sam Havey. I mentioned his name. The Williamson product really stepped in huge this year. He went into the final spot in that rotation, especially into the postseason, and he really played some consistent good golf for Coach Stark, and you see a lot of the promise, and I'm not going to necessarily put too much pressure on him, but you saw a lot of the things you saw from McCoy. You saw a lot of the same things from Caleb. This kid can be a star, and I really like where he's going, watching him a little bit playing the Bulldog Classic. I think Sam's really going to be heading upward, and I'm really looking forward to see what he does next year.
Yeah. Good points, Brandon. Way to go.
Man. Nailed it.
I got to go with a guy who has already kind of showed that he is a good player, but still he has some stuff to prove just being so young. Caleb Bond. I think you saw him play very well round 1, round 2 of the national tournament, but had a little bit of a rough spot in that round 3 day. I think he posted up a +5, but still being able to kind of have the expectations of being, because he had such a good year last year, then especially coming to this one, had pressure to keep that going. He did, and I think you're going to see him improved exponentially more with his upcoming year. So I think too, gotta watch out for Caleb, man. Dude's a dog.
That's a dog. And a freshman of the year honoree only 2 years ago. Only upwards for that fellow.
And somebody's got to take home that #1 spot in all of North America. So
that is true.
Be him.
There it is.
All right, so I'm going to go with Cole Putnam. I think that he's a guy that could really step up and maybe challenge for one of those top 3 or 4 spot in the rotation consistently for this team. The freshman from this past year from Gaylord, I think he's one of those guys that could really step up and take over that role at the back end of the lineup, and then maybe even in 2 or 3 years from now, start pushing guys like McCoy and Caleb up at the top of the lineup and see what happens down the road.
Absolutely. 3 great picks. We'll go to the women's side for 3 more great picks. Looking at their roster, it's so weird how almost identical and similar both rosters are made up. Mm-hmm. Only one senior. Danny is the lone senior. And then there's also a group of, I believe if I'm counting correctly, 3 juniors. Hope Thiebaud, Lauren Kempf, and Abby Gravel, all 3 juniors. So we may see them next year. We may not, just where the workforce goes and what their options are. But then the rest of them, Cameron Shannon, Taylor Musselman, Susie Gittle, Hallie Crozier, Lizzie Anderson, all sophomores and freshmen. That's a really big part of the core, and that's something that's certainly looking up for this team moving forward. I'm not going to go completely reciprocal, but it's going to be very similar with my pick. I'm going to go with Taylor Musselman, the sophomore out of Coldwater. Very similar to Sam Havey. I love seeing the consistency, and that's one of the key aspects that I look for a lot of the times with these breakout candidates is seeing the consistent growth year over year. And you saw it from her, I think especially her stepping up very similar in the way that we just saw from Sam Havey on the men's side. I think we saw very well. And so naturally, it's just going to be a slam dunk pick for me. So I'm going to go with Taylor. I think she's got a really big high ceiling. And as Michael Jordan once said, the ceiling is the roof, so only ways upward, baby.
The ceiling is the roof. I got to go with mine with Cam Shannon. I feel like already being the team's #1, I think you're still going to see her keep that train rolling for this next year coming up. And you saw her, especially in that last match of the year, you saw, I think in par 3, she was the 6th or 7th best performer. I think she had, a +1 on the weekend. And then she still did well in par 4s and par 5s. And she's been a player, especially talking to her, whose approach to each round and each shot is just one that's just bred for success. It's just kind of focusing on the next one. And I think if you can have that, especially as a sophomore, having that mentality, she's going to be a great leader on the team next year and being able to kind of culminate even more success for the next group of people that are coming in. So Cameron Shannon is my pick. Watch out.
Good pick.
I'm going to take another freshman that Brandon, as you just alluded to, has a very high ceiling, and I'm going to take Hallie. I think she really had a great year as she came in as a freshman. Much like McCoy on the other side, we keep drawing these parallels between both the men's and the women's teams, but it's really remarkable, like you were saying, Brandon, just how similar these rosters are. And she was outstanding, consistent placer in the top 5 for this team, a really big-time performer. Can she take that next step and jump to the 2 or 3 spot in this lineup? That's what the Bulldogs need her to do, and I think that she can do it. She was also one of the nominees for Bulldog Women Rookie of the Year at the ESPYs that we had just a little over a month ago now, but really says how much that she was able to achieve in her freshman season. So great season for her, and I think she's the breakout pick.
Absolutely. Those are our picks. That's our golf recap. Be sure to subscribe, follow along, whether you're with us on WBRN Live or if you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, WBRN.com. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the rest of the summer series. We got our bye week out of the way, fellas. It's full steam ahead, basically, for the rest of the year. So we are geared up and ready. Joe's now scared. We might have another bye week.
We might have our insurance week on the technical difficulties.
We had the week 4 bye, the classic early season bye. So now end of the season, we got to be ready to go.
We really do.
We're going to be beaten up, but we're going to be ready to go.
So for sure. So fellas, go home, get some rest.
Bessie, don't call quits on
Yeah, it's true. Say some prayers for Bessie that we'll be back next week and she'll be working properly. But I guess until next time.
Take care, everybody.